So I want to get on to the meaty part of today, which is the establishment of the committees and appointments of chairpersons, deputy chairpersons and so on. Aucklanders have sent a strong message that we must slim down and direct our attention to fixing the major issues facing our city. I've designed this structure to enable focused, efficient decision-making on these issues, and it follows interviews with every person on the council, at least twice. It has the following features. There are fewer committees. There are 3 fewer committees of the whole than last term, which will reduce administrative burden and enable focus on governance rather than attendance. There are clear decision-making responsibilities and accountabilities, and I wish to empower more business-like committees, discourage unnecessary reports, and avoid relitigation of matters where possible. I want to focus on pressing priorities. My structure reflects the necessary priorities of this team, which relate to budget control for this term, transport and CCO direction. For example, the new Transport and Infrastructure Committee will focus on overseeing the much-needed change of approach at Auckland Transport. There are opportunities for each councillor to contribute in a meaningful role. It has been the result of much consultation, and this is what I have chosen. Hopefully today that we will accept this. Today I don't want to relitigate it as my decisions. I'll only accept anyone's resignation who doesn't want to take part, but at the moment you've all got meaningful roles which I expect you to work hard and as a team and produce the results which the people of Auckland are looking for. Do I have a mover and a seconder to note the decisions of the Mayor and the committee and chairpersons?
You'll move, Your Worship, and I'm happy to second.
Beg your pardon?
I think you should move, and I'm happy to second.
I'll move it then, and you and the Deputy Chair will second that. We'll have questions and debate before we put the motion. So, you've all read it. You're all aware of it. And Angela Dalton has a question.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Angela Dalton.
Good morning, and thank you. I'm happy to participate. I just have a couple of questions of clarification. So on the decision-making committees, can all councillors attend even if they're not a member of that committee? As an example, audit and risk.
Yes, for those of you who have nothing better to do every day, you can do that.
Thank you. On the terms of reference on page 6, it says that the chair is the spokesperson for the committee. My question is that to media, and perhaps that's somewhat answered today with the joint media statement by Councillor Lee and Watson in their respective roles. So for each decision-making committee, is the chair the spokesperson, and is that fronting media for that particular committee of responsibility?
Well, I think that's true. But remember, as a spokesperson, you just identify what you're speaking on behalf of for that committee, but that's fine. And for those of you who are making speeches to the press on general things, do so by identifying yourself. I'm not clamping down on anyone not speaking to anybody on anything, but I'm not too happy with the unidentified councillor who said they weren't happy with something or other. If you want to do that, identify yourself.
So my second question relating to that is, how do we ensure that we're going to keep the team united on that? Because there's going to be differences in views around, and it goes back to my question yesterday when I said, are we going to agree on what who we are as a council? I mean, we've got a pretty good steer where we're going to be more efficient, more streamlined, more economic. But if we've got councillors that are leading conversations on behalf of the committees that they are chairing, and we're not all aligned, will it cause disruption?
I hope not, would be the response to that. But we live in a democracy where everyone's allowed to make their statements, and you're all allowed to if, for instance, you're in a committee that you're involved in, and you find that there is a debate, and you vote on it, and it's 4-3 or something or other like that, then you should announce. We had a vigorous debate here. Not everybody was in favour of this, but we have made a decision, and it was won or lost 4-3 or 5-2 or whatever it might be, and that is the report for that. And each of the committees will be required to provide a short, informative statement to the governing body when it meets next about what substantive issues that you have debated and decided. So everybody who attends the governing body will know what's going on in general terms, even if they don't attend every one of those ones.
And just on what comes back to the governing body, under the Expenditure Control and Procurement Committee, there is the purpose of the committee is to approve acquisition and disposal of property. Does that, it used to come back to finance? So this is a decision-making committee now. So if there are agreements within that committee to dispose of assets inside the LTP, then that's it, that's the final decision. So for councillors who aren't attending, they would need to just keep on top of the minutes from that meeting to know what's happening, because it's not going to come back for everybody to have a conversation about. That was the point of making the committees more efficient.
Well, I think so, but we've always had committees like that. I mean, the audit committee was never everybody. And we have, as a councillor, you have a responsibility to keep up to date with what's published. Is that right?
Can I help, Your Worship? I suppose, can I give a suggestion to help here? I think what's important is that all agendas will be available to all councillors, all right? And I think that if you're not on a committee and there's a decision or an agenda item that you want input to, you know who's on that committee and you can talk to those councillors. You can even turn up and have your say. So I think it's important. No one's saying that you can't be involved. And I think that's a good way of being able to get your view across to the team.
I appreciate that, and I will be reading the agendas and attending committees. I'm just making sure everyone is aware that this is not going to be relitigated at any other committee. That there has to be a real awareness of what's on agendas for every decision-making committee and the minutes that come out, and there is no relitigation. Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
So just for my clarification, so I understand. So what we're saying here is that anyone who speaks on behalf of a committee in any way is speaking the majority opinion of the committee, and otherwise you have to do it as yourself and not as a councillor. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is that if a committee has not tabled subjects that you wanted to get onto that committee because you haven't got a presence that you can force a subject to the committee, do you just get it on by notice of motion through the committee of the whole or something?
Well, I hope that we've grown up enough that you could actually chat to one of the people or the chairperson of that committee and raise your thing, and they will, if it's completely wrong, outside ultra vires what they're doing, they'll say, no, you've gone in the wrong place. Or they might say, well, that's reasonable, I will take that up. And for those who can't manage that adult behaviour, you can always give me a call.
Good, thank you, sir.
Councillor Sayers.
Yes, thank you. Can we comment at this stage, Chair? Yeah, thank you.
Question time
Question
before
time.
we vote on it.
Okay. Well, if I could just make a general comment before we go to the vote, and that I appreciate the way that you've undertaken the exercise, Mayor, in terms of involving us and speaking to each of us, and that's time-consuming. But certainly, speaking as an individual, I very much appreciated the opportunity to go through the committee structures with you, to have input and feel comfortable with not only my own role, but in terms of the general structure that you've come up with the number of committees. And on that note, I would like to endorse the committee structures that you've come up with, the number of them, and I do hope that they do prove as efficient as you're planning, as you've just introduced them. On that note, you mentioned about the reports that we receive, and I think you're indicating perhaps the size of those reports. I just, speaking to the officers that are preparing those reports, it's certainly helpful if we have a number of options in the recommendations. So I'd just like to table as a general comment that how helpful it is, and my expectation that we would have, at least 2 or 3 options put forward to us with 2 or 3 sets of pros and cons on each of those options to help our decision making. That hasn't always been the case, and I just hope that efforts put into producing that type of report, and any comment that you'd like to make along those lines is welcomed as well, Your Worship. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that supportive thing. I should let everybody know that was off the cuff from him. I had no idea he was going to be quite so positive, but thank you for that. In terms of the options, you'll note that we're getting that already, to the extent that yesterday the meeting, which went on a bit too long, but we'll finish later, and did contain a number of options. And I think that I'd like to thank the governance group and the leadership team for picking up on that we don't want to just have the option of accepting or rejecting what comes. And so that is good. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you for that. I was just wondering, can we make it that if there's something on one of the reports that is significant to one of our communities, I'm thinking about the 40-foot, that we make sure that the council officer who's reporting makes sure that, all of us, if there's something significant on a report, that we're actually notified, because sometimes we don't get the agendas until just the night before, and there could be 500 or 600, 700 pages or something, and something could be buried somewhere. But if there is something that is a bit significant to one of us in our, for our communities, I think it's really important that our community advisors or the writer of the report just make sure that they send us a little message to just make sure that we're aware of it.
Yeah, hopefully that will take place. It's not an unreasonable request, but if it's 600 or 700 pages, I should be very grumpy.
Yeah, that's what we have had, so thank you.
Yes, well, the idea of the précis is slowly trickling into the organisation. I have a question from Councillor Hills.
Kia ora, Mayor, thank you. Just have one question. It's just because I haven't experienced how it works as a councillor. How do you see the 2 members of Auckland Transport, the councillors that will be directors, how do you see the interface happening between the overall council? And because they're technically independent directors, are they there to speak on behalf of the council, and how will that be? Will there be opportunities for all of us to somehow give information to those as a group? Yeah, I just want to understand how it works because I haven't experienced it.
Well, there's lots of things that we have to discover for the first time. I expect that the councillors who are appointed to Auckland Transport will report to the substantial committee, which we're all on, of the Transport Committee, and so Councillor Watson's committee will have an early item every time on feedback and feed to the AT directors, and so anything will go through quite a laborious process of checking, because not only will it go through Councillor Watson's committee, but that also will have a report for anything that's extremely substantive will come up to the general governing body. So your question, in fact, has other examples elsewhere, because it's not just people who are AET directors, there are people who have interests, even as Councillor Stewart's, on various things which will have to be feedback. So we'll all be keeping aware of what's going on, but I don't think you have to actually attend everything. Councillor Dalton might wish to attend everything, but after a while, I'm sure she'll find other things to occupy her. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. And Mr Mayor, congratulations on your committee structure. I know you took a lot of care and were quite painstaking about making everything fit. During the discussions you had with councillors, including myself, I personally raise my concern to see a Parks Committee. You've given me and others the assurance that the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee will cover parks matters well. My concern comes from my being a relic, if you like, of the old Auckland Regional Council, and I am aware that regional parks was one of the most popular things in local government in New Zealand, and so it's important that we give due recognition of the importance of the value of the people of Auckland and its intrinsic value of that wonderful parks network, including local parks which are much loved and which have been under threat and even sale in the previous administration. So thank you.
Thank you for that, and I did hear that, and Councillor Hills has been given a senior role to make sure that those things are covered. It is also worth noting that amongst the 300 meetings I went to, there was no real complaints about parks. So it isn't one that requires fixing. It requires the ongoing management along the lines of what's been going on. But there were another number of things, not least of which is the organisation with which I'm trusting you to represent us, which needs nothing but fixing.
Mr Mayor, can I just say the regional parks management plan drew many submissions, and it was concerns about what could have happened in that actually drew me back into the world of politics. Thank you.
Councillor Newman, by the way, it's not absolutely necessary you all speak, but I'm not going to stop anyone from exercising their vocal cords if it's important to them.
Thank you. Your Worship, I support your recommendation for the appointments of the structure, but specifically the appointments of Councillor Lee and Councillor Baker as directors. But just for the purpose of clarification, whilst there may well be an opportunity for feedback and for feed forward, I understand that they are not delegates of the governing body, that they are first and foremost directors, and they'll have to exercise their good judgment, independent of whatever you or I or others might think about this matter, because ultimately they have to fulfil their directors' duties. To the extent that they are members of the Committee of the Whole for the Transport Infrastructure Committee, I would expect that there would be occasion where they would probably have to exit the discussions if there are matters for which they would be addressed at the Board of Auckland Transport, and that there may well be a conflict, but wouldn't that be addressed at the moment as those matters were to arise?
Well, the exercise of discretion is one of the things we were elected for. And for those of you who can exercise them, you'll be rewarded with continuing positions. And for those who won't. I hope that answers that. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, wondering if you talk us through the lead council role for CCOs, because I understand it's an expanded role from the liaison councillor in the past.
Well, that's probably as apposite as Councillor Newman's worry about the AT thing. And already Councillor Turner has been asked to sign an NDA before he looks at anything at Watercare and I've encouraged him not to bother signing an NDA. And we have appointed directors at Watercare with whom we expect discretion and sensible behaviour. And if they seem to think that the people that we're sending along require more whipping to behave well than they do, then they are setting themselves up for loss of confidence from the council, which will lead to their replacement. So I'm having this little trial where everyone's going to be given the opportunity to behave like grown-ups. Please don't let me down. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship, and it's opportune for me to come and speak now after you said grown up, because that's what I am. I am grown up. So, Your Worship, I just wanted to acknowledge our staff at this stage based on what Councillor Lee has just said around regional parks, because that management plan took us quite a while to put through. There was a lot of angst around the community, but I want to acknowledge the director, the EEO around getting that management plan through September of last year. So of this year. So I want to acknowledge them. Your Worship, I look forward to the 6 months when there is a review, according to the papers, of the committee structure, because then when anything that will happen in that 6 months. So I personally will not be saying anything around the committee structure, because as you said, Your Worship, this is your structure. So I look forward to the 6 months. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Filipaina. And my understanding, there is no imperative to change the management plan. As I say, that is one sector of the council's operations which does not appear to be a thorn in the public's side.
Yeah.
We do have other sectors which do require substantial change, and so I don't imagine that you're going to be disappointed by that.
Yeah.
And if you are, you can go and see Councillor Hills and let him
sorry.
share your disappointment, but I don't think it's in his...
Sorry, Your Worship, the point I wanted to make was that the management plan has gone through and it won't get reviewed for another 10 years. So that's the point I'm making. It'll be reviewed in 10 years. So we got it for 10 years. There's no issue.
Bingo. Councillor Fuli, please. Morena.
Morena, Your Worship, and morena to our governing body members as well. I do want to start by thanking you for the appointments that I've received. I'm very happy with that, and I thank you for the good conversations we had leading up to that. So kia ora. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Newman was making, in particular for our two learned colleagues who sit on Auckland Transport. And I think we can still go forward with today's decision, but it might be prudent for us to get some advice from our legal team, because they're a little bit different to the lead councillors, because the lead councillors on those CCOs are still at arm's length somewhat. They're not directors in the same way that our two colleagues on Auckland Transport will be directors and will be bound by all the laws around that. So it might be good just to get some legal advice, just so that they are clear what their roles are, and so that they're protected going forward. So I just wanted to talk all the issue that Councillor Newman was raising. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuli. The legal advice is always available to all councillors should you find yourself in a position where you need some, and hopefully that's not going to occur. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just want to follow on, I think, from a question that Councillor Newman raised, and it just goes to the relationship between the board chair and the deputy, and I'm referring to the CCO committee in this respect, where quite obviously the committee has to have direction and oversight over the council-controlled organisations, making the assumption that both the chair and the deputy will have access to things like board minutes and the like, board information, information around that respective CCO, and access to the meetings where required.
Well, that's the expectation, that the chairs and deputies will work together to create useful agendas, and we always have the governing body to come back to if there are issues of lack of access. That should be raised at that level there, and it's appropriate that I, as the mayor, have the opportunity to call in chairs of CCOs and bark at them if that's not, or rather instruct them, I should say, if that does occur. But we are living in an open environment, and we are encouraging all levels of ours, both within and without the organisations, to behave in an open and sensible manner. Thank you. Councillor Simpson. Deputy Mayor Simpson, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you, Your Worship. Look, in closing the debate, I think I'm closing the debate. I just want to say congratulations. No, I'm not. Congratulations. Oh, sorry. No, well, we've been doing both. So if you, Councillor, I'm happy for you to go first.
Councillor Darby?
Can we have some clarification that the Deputy Mayor was about to close the debate and we're in the middle of questions? So,
Well, at the time, I had no questions up here and waiting to speak. So I have a little thing here.
Okay.
And so it's not done without some thought. All right? And so if you're happy, given the fact I'm announcing that nobody was there waiting to speak, Councillor Simpson put her name up next and said that. But if you've got one, Councillor Darby, I'm quite happy to allow you to do that.
I've got more than a couple. Just in the absence of the competencies that Adrian Young-Cooper and Tommy Parker brought, so Adrian Young-Cooper had extensive governance experience, of course, extensive chairing experience, government to council relationship experience. Tommy Parker had probably engineering experience, second to none on the board. In the absence of those competencies, what competencies were you looking for to complement the existing competencies at the board and arriving at your choices? So what competencies were you looking to identify in the appointed members? And the second part of that question is the appointment of the Auckland Transport names that are before us, Councillors Lee and Baker, is it consistent entirely with the appointments policy, the CCO appointments policy as well? So that's probably a legal question for Mr. Stabbock to reply to. That's the first part.
Well, can I have a go at those?
On the first one, yeah.
You're right. The councillor, the former chairperson of Auckland Transport was an experienced chairperson, and it showed in her timely decision to resign. And I've subsequently spoken with her, and Adrian and I have enjoyed good relationships. She has passed on to me the ongoing concerns at the time, but like fully experienced chairs and directors, they know that they are there at the pleasure of the appointee, and if anyone who's been an experienced chairperson and director will have at some stage resigned, you notice that the ones who are not experienced cling on like barnacles. But she didn't, and so I respect her for that. Tommy did have particular skills, but he also had a conflict because his involvement in the...
Sorry, Mayor, I'm not actually reflecting on the history. I'm actually reflecting...
You did ask me to.
Yeah, I asked a question about the competencies that you were looking for.
Well,
to complement those. It's not a good look to be bagging people that are not here.
I've not bagged them. In fact, I have respected both of those people. In terms of the competencies we are looking for within the people we chose, we're looking for a strong interest in transport matters, and Councillor Lee has had a lifetime of interest in Auckland transport matters. And I looked also to have a balancing of urban and rural, because rural transport imperatives have been somewhat ignored in Auckland. And so my second choice was either going to be Councillor Sayers or Councillor Baker, who both have strong interest in rural roads. And we tend to forget that Auckland goes from Pukekohe to Wellsford. And one of our worst performing roads is State Highway 1 between Warkworth and Wellsford, which in fact is a state highway, but is also a major arterial route for the city. And so that's the balancing I had. And it's marvellous to know that I had a number of people who showed express interest in being in Auckland Transport. And I had to disappoint a person who had been a Minister of Transport. But I made choices, and so they are entirely consistent with the rules and regulations associated with finding suitable, experienced. And so I'm not begging either the former chairperson, who I believe showed great skill and mana in making her decisions, and in Tommy, who is working himself into something of a conflict of interest, and accepts that as well. And his experience will not be lost to Greater Auckland. It's just being shifted to another site. So I'm very happy with the decisions that I've made, and thank you for your questions.
So just, would you expect the directors that we're sending to undertake director training through something like Institute of Directors Director Training course?
That's not essential. I mean, I'm a fellow of the Institute of Directors, and for people who know nothing about practical business, it probably has an opportunity, but Councillor Baker has been a chair of a local board for a number of years, terms actually, and Councillor Lee has almost, you could describe his experience in local government senior positions in a generational term rather than in years, and so I'm quite confident with that.
The second part to that question, probably it's for Mr. Stabbock. Is the legal team, what's their view? Is the appointment of the directors to the Auckland Transport Board totally consistent, aligns with the CCO appointments policy?
I might have to take some advice on that from one of the legal team. My understanding, Councillor, is that it is in line with Auckland Council's ability. That is, we do have the ability to make 2 councillor appointments to the Auckland Transport Board.
I'd add to that I had legal advice with me all the time through the negotiations and settling of this, of the proposal which you're about to vote on. So it has been legally reviewed at every step of the way.
Yep, I did have discussion with Mr. Hardy on that, and he wasn't aware of the policy at the time of our discussion, so that's what I was wanting to make sure that it had been checked.
Thank you for making him aware, but he went back and had a look at that.
Okay. And just carrying on in terms of CCOs, Mayor, I expressed to you the former CCO liaison councillors were weak roles. I always repeated my request for better resourcing, that's staff resourcing. So in that CCO governance oversight unit, their reply was, we don't have the human resource to support the CCO liaison councillors. So will you be ensuring that there is human resource in that office to support the new councillor leads in doing their work and ensuring that they are informed by not just themselves, as it was before, but by a staff unit to go to the respective CCOs and be articulating council points of view that are contributed to by staff? So that was absent before. I highlighted it to you. I think it's a big hole. It would require more resource in that particular unit. Are you supportive of that occurring?
In the absence of the staff doing that, I do have a budget in the Mayor's office as well. So it may well be that the Mayor's office takes up that slack somehow or other, but it is important that those roles are much more effective than what they had been in before. They were a tokenism role. I'm not into tokenism. They are expected to be valuable, resourced roles. And the people in those positions, and I believe you're one of them, will presumably come to me with whatever it is that you're short of. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. We'll pursue that. Just in terms of the IMSB participation on committees under Section 85 of the Auckland Establishment Act, the IMSB used to be at the Finance Committee, and they used to be at the Finance Committee business meetings and workshop meetings, participating in decisions, financial decisions on natural and physical resources, which is what the Act says they're allowed to participate in. In fact, it requires them to participate in. Can you just describe how they continue to participate at that same level as they did in the Finance Committee on all aspects of decision-making on natural and physical resources at the governing body? That's the first part. And the second part is we have always heard some disquiet from the IMSB on their lack of participation at the Appointments Committee when it came to discuss the Chief Executive's performance, his contract, etc., even though the Chief Executive and his work is very much involved with the natural and physical resources of Auckland. So first question is describing how they fully participate under Section 85 on financial matters at GB, as they did before, with no erosion of that. And second, is there a willingness to amend the terms of reference or the membership and participation of the IMSB so that they are full participants, not part-timers at the Appointments Committee, as I've described?
Right, well, I have, not surprisingly, met several times with the IMSB members, including Mr. David Taipari at a number of times, who's well aware of this and is quite happy with the overall positioning of the committees and their membership of them, including that of the CCO advisory committees and the committees, which decision-making committees relating to the performance of the CEO. The questioning about the Finance Committee doing most of its work at the governing body has been raised, and we are considering, when working with them, on two ways of solving that, and they're quite happy that we are going to solve it. They'll either be able to attend and vote on finance issues only at the governing body, or alternatively, they are considering a working subcommittee arrangement where they could be, all that input could be received as well. So I'm quite well aware of that. We haven't quite sorted that, but that doesn't stop us from approving this and getting on with it. And David Taipari is quite happy with the progress in the way that we're working so that this can happen. In addition, in December, I'm inviting and hosting a meeting of all of the various iwi contributors to our region. We will be, again, talking through with them about their terms of engagement and how that can be done in a manner which is both meeting the legal requirements and producing more effective results. So, good question, and that is well covered. Thank you.
So Mr. Taipari has expressed to me a desire for the IMSB to be represented fully on the Appointments Committee. Did he not convey that to you?
No, he is represented on the Appointments Committee.
No, fully. He's not represented. He's represented on 3 of the 4 work focus areas, not on work stream, well, not so much a work stream, but the area identified as 1, which is treating with the Chief Executive's performance and appointment.
He is involved in that. So, and Mr. Taipari has issues, he will talk to me. Okay.
So he will be involved with that.
Well, he is involved in that, and we only met.
In the last term, that wasn't the case.
Eh?
In the last term, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, in the last term it wasn't the case, but it is now, and so that isn't an issue at the current state.
Okay, if that's not an issue and it's changed, then it needs to be changed in the documents that I'm reading, because it identifies that the IMSB will only participate on areas 2 to 4.
Well, the other thing is that there is clear legislative requirements on both IMSB and us. And there are times when both parties try and push it. And they have requested a couple of things which we're not legally able to give them. But we have a good relationship going on, and you'll just have to accept that.
Okay, well, it's under a different, I think it's under a different report. I think it's the Terms of Reference report.
It may well be.
So maybe we need to pick that up there. But I mean, it's great if you're willing to accept them fully on all parts. That's fantastic. Just the last area is on the Big Mammoth Committee, the Planning, Environment, Parks, is it? Having been the outgoing Planning Committee Chair and done 6 years of that and 3 years as Deputy, I expressed to you no desire to carry on. But I did say to you that it is a...
Change your mind?
No. No, there's good people to do that. I did express to you the enormity of the tasks of just the Planning Committee. And on the Planning Committee, there are 21 work streams outstanding in its work program. There are 16 outstanding major work streams in the Environment Committee, Climate Change Committee, and 18 on the Parks, Arts, Community Events Committee. And you're putting those into one committee. And I'm mindful of how the demands on my time and Deputy Chair at the time, Josephine Bartley, on just Planning Committee, now they are one committee with an enormous workload, absolutely enormous, sitting under a chair and a deputy. I didn't provide you with the feedback of splitting them up. You asked me, you pushed me and you said, well, if there was to be an amalgamation, what would you amalgamate? I said, my reply was, maintain the status quo, and with a possibility of looking at the PACE Committee with Environment and Climate Change, but only in part. So I'm just wondering where the councillors that you interviewed were on you arriving, what were their positions on this massive amalgamation arriving at your decision to have a mega committee? And did you consider the lesser scrutiny, the lesser governance scrutiny that might occur because of the enormity of the reach of this mega committee?
Well, it's no surprising you wanted to get off it if you had all that work left undone. But perhaps it might be because they produced too many work streams. This place is overloaded with unfinished work streams in every corner. And it seems to be that the go-to solution for something or other is initiate an unfunded work stream or an unfunded policy. And so I think a bit of pressure on everybody works quite well. If in 6 months' time it's getting worse, then we'll reconsider it. Okay?
Okay, so you think that, from what I'm hearing, from what your answer is there, introduced by another bit of bagging.
No, don't bagging.
And what you're suggesting is that the work streams of the committees, and they're considerable if they're amalgamated, will fall away and there will be a much lesser program of work.
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that we do have a hell of a lot of them if they're unfinished. And I think that Councillor Hills has a challenge ahead of him, and which he has put his hand up to accept, and we'll see how it goes.
So you're not willing at this meeting to reconsider?
No, this meeting is a meeting of what I have putting forward. That's what, and I'm not going to debate it here for changes. It's either accepted or isn't. I will accept resignations for people who don't want positions, but other than that, I'm going to put the motion.
Okay, thanks for the questions.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Newman. Do you still want to make a speech? No. Councillor Watson.
Not a speech, Mr Mayor, but just a brief comment to provide a bit of historical perspective, certainly in respect of the AT board appointments. this isn't exactly uncharted territory. In the first 2 terms of Auckland Council, there were 2 councillors on the AT board. That was Councillor Lee and Councillor Fletcher, who did an excellent job. With the advent of the former mayor, that was changed, and I don't, I think in all honesty that was not a popular move as far as the Auckland public were concerned. They appreciated those elected personnel being on that board. So for my part, irrespective of the personnel who are involved, I'm very glad to see elected officials back on the AT board, and I'm sure that will be the view of most Aucklanders. Thank you.
Okay.
I was just going to close and support Your Worship and say congratulations again to you and the team. It's a hard job doing this. It is a more efficient, streamlined approach. But my comments were directed to my colleagues. This is for us to get right. This streamlined approach actually encourages us to talk to each other, to share our views with each other, and to make sure that we work right across all opportunities for political and personal and local preferences to make this work. So my challenge to you is and I think you all have accepted that, is to step up and make it work. To Councillor Sayers, we do have a quality advice steering group. More than happy for you to come along to that, but I'll take on your comments around a number of options and reports as part of that quality of advice. But in conclusion, congratulations. I'm happy to support it, and I ask you as colleagues to work together to ensure this works really well for Auckland. Thank you.
Just before I put the vote, Councillor Bartley is a late inclusion in the questioning, but in the interest of open debate, let's hear your little gem.
I don't have any gems, but thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to ask around, because I share the same concerns as Councillor Dalton in regards to the expenditure committee, because, everyone's talking about how it's the razor gang, so I'm worried about what's going to be cut. But then I look at the terms of reference and it does say it's disposal acquisition in accordance with the LTP. So I take some comfort there. The Auckland Transport Directors, I'm assuming they're going to be championing TERP as well on there as directors, because that will be what the AT board hopefully also is going to be proposing, or am I wrong? Is that right?
I don't know the answer to that last one there because we don't know what the AT board are busy doing, but we will find out shortly. Now we've got 2 people on it.
Yeah, and then I also share the same concerns around the Planning, Environment and Parks Committee. Even in the name of the title, there's nothing about arts, there's nothing about community, nothing about our events. So I don't want that community side to drop off from being in a big committee like that. So I do look forward to the 6-month review. Nothing to do with the chair or the deputy chair and their competency, but even in the naming, it's dropped off. So, and that is massive. So 6 months' time, hopefully it is going to work out and we don't see that they've been dropped off the radar.
Well, the word sports isn't there either, but I'm sure that'll be covered as well. So you've just got to see the big picture here and hope it all works out. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's cool. And then also this thing about we've just got to keep up with the agendas of the other committees. That's putting me back into local board land, because that's what we tell local boards. Just keep up with GB agendas. And it doesn't work in reality because you're busy with everything else. But that's okay because we're grown-ups. We'll just manage. And we have lesser committees to attend to now. So
Well, you know who they are. You can chat to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Helpful. The irrepressible Council Derby.
Thank you. Do you need to add a C that the A and the B will be reviewed after 6 months, or we just take it on the record here of this meeting that you will be reviewing? I'm happy.
Well, I said I didn't put a particular date on it. But and I'm sure when you do these things, my previous experience is that most of what you choose works out pretty well, but there's always one that has a bit of a difficulty. So we'll see what happens. But you've all got the opportunity to raise things that you're deeply concerned about if one or two, you've raised questions about Councillor Hill's committee. There are others who are worried about the Auckland Transport representation. I'm sure we'll hear these things as we go through, and that will guide us on what review exactly when it takes, and it may be a progressive one. But I am telling you now that I keep an eye on things, and I'm quite prepared to change them if they're not going well.
Okay, well, look, I'll just take it as an assumption that there's a review in 6 months, which is what you mentioned before. Just
6 to 8 months, who knows? I'm not exactly giving you a date, but when.
Yeah, okay.
And bearing in mind the next 2 months we're going to shut shop, apparently.
So just speaking to this briefly, I'm just going to focus on that mega committee. And like, I want to reiterate that I have serious concern about that. About the size of it, of the planning, what is it? Environment and parks and everything else that is within that.
Well, you're not prevented from contributing.
One of the things that you brought, Mayor, is that we have greater scrutiny over CCOs. There is a risk that we have less scrutiny where our greatest responsibility is, which is that core responsibility of being governors around this council table. When you look at the work streams, and it's not unfinished work, it's ongoing work that I've mentioned. And that work stream of those 3 former committees is enormous. If there is a preparedness to review that and reduce that, then there will be less governance and therefore less scrutiny when you've been talking about the opposite of achieving greater scrutiny. And I think that is a major risk in a mega committee as being outlined. And I, with respect to the chair and deputy, I know from experience that the competency and capacity is just not there to undertake the enormity of the work streams that sit under all that. And I also know it would not be the recommendation of the chief executive and his staff to have such a committee either. So it's your call, but I think there is, in your effort to do more with less, there's also the risk of just achieving less with less, and that is less scrutiny at the very place there should be greater scrutiny, which is right around the
I'll tell you, the public would say that the greater scrutiny is definitely required in transport than anything else. And so, and a lot of the things in Councillor Hill's committee are actually going quite well, even if there is a lot of work ahead of them. So I accept what your comments, and I'm quite sure that Councillors Hill and Dalton have heard them and taken note, and will do their jolly best, and we'll see where we get to. Right, Councillor Henderson.
Sorry, just a tiny one, Mayor. I'm just wondering if we change liaison councillors to lead councillors, just so we've got consistency in terminology under A.
Well, we can, words with an L, what about likely or loving councillors? We can, I don't think it's going to change much, but if that's what's burning you, Hills and then Walker.
I was just going to mention you're both liaison and leads within your...
Yeah, well, the lead liaison committees, okay. Councillor Hills.
No, thank you. Just quickly wanted to appreciate the appointment, and I know that Councillor and Dalton have a lot of work ahead, but we are ready for it, and we want to work with all our colleagues, local boards, IMSB, yourself, to get this done. And a lot of staff have already said that there are a lot of things to do, but we will get this done together. So just want to appreciate all the work you've tried to do to get everyone roles that they appreciate across what is a very difficult job for you to do. So just appreciate that going forward, and we are very aware of the workload ahead.
I think that you and Councillor Watson both have big workloads, and it's reflected in Councillor Dalton. You were chosen there to follow. If you finally have trouble attending every other meeting, you might follow those 18 unfinished work streams to the end, please. Okay, we have great faith in all of you, so I'm now going to put that. All those in favour of the adoption of the acceptance of the whatever. Note the decisions of the Mayor and the committees of the Government and the appointment of chairpersons and liaisons, portfolio leads as President in Amendment A, and appoint Mike Lee and Andy Baker as Directors of Auckland Transport. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary?
Can you
Carried.
record-
Thank you very much.
Can you record my vote against the mega committee, however the Secretariat or the Governance Advisor wishes to record that?
Your vote against what? You either voted for it or against it. Did you vote for it or against it?
The Governance Advisor might be able to give you some advice on how we record these things. Where there's dissent in part, it can be recorded, and I'm asking for that to be recorded.
Okay, you record your dissent in part.
Yep.
And have you got the right part to this? There you are. Very well done. Thank you very much, everybody. Pat yourselves on the back. We can go on to